It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Aggronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things, and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Belghast, and let's start the show. Hey folks, it's that time again. Time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 295. Tonight I'm joined by Ammo.
Hello.
Ashgar.
How many years now?
We're in our 7th. Godra.
What year is it?
2020. Tam.
Hello. What is time?
Time is an illusion.
Phelan?
Lunchtime, so on and so on. Hey.
So, last week, on Sunday, when we normally release the show, it was our 6th anniversary of this show. Or at least the 6th anniversary of the first recording of the show. So we're officially in our 7th year, and seasons and episodes are meaningless still.
Yep.
I should have done this better when we started, because it would have made more sense, but like now we're on a thing, and
seasons are hard.
The time to fix that was 6 years ago. So it's too late now.
It's way too late. It's crazy we've been doing this long. So every so often I have a Belle was dumb story to tell, and I think I will lead the show off with one of these. We get a lot of stuff in the mail and package deliveries, and boxes are a scourge. Like, we don't really use our garage, and we more or less use our garage like a warehouse where stuff sits until we're ready to deal with it. And I have a bad habit of throwing boxes out there until I'm ready to break them down.
Sounds very familiar.
We don't have curbside recycling here. Like, that is not a thing that exists. We do, however, have these little bins called Mr. Murph, which are green bins spread throughout I don't know how far and wide they go, but we have several of them in town. So every so often, generally every couple months, I break down a bunch of boxes and take them to Mr. Murph. And I hadn't done that since before Christmas. And what I can only term as the box apocalypse was happening in our garage. And I couldn't move around out there. So I set forth today to change that and to fix it. And I spent like the morning breaking down boxes, and in my infinite wisdom, I thought, oh, hey, we've gotten a lot of largest shipments. We have some big boxes. I will break down the boxes and put them in the larger box to make it easier to carry. When you cram 60 Amazon boxes into another Amazon box, that box gets really freaking heavy.
It does.
It's basically a tree at that point. Like, it's a little bit more airy than a tree because
it's
more like a book.
Yeah.
A really, really big book.
or a crate full of books, which also feels like lifting a tree.
So I had a couple of these boxes that were full of other boxes. We also, in our infinite wisdom, decided, oh, hey, we're home for a while. We'll remodel the loft. And not really remodel, but like swap out some furniture. We set some stuff by the curb and put free signs on it, and shockingly, within 30 minutes, it was all gone. But we put together like a giant hutch thing that's now serving as an entertainment center. So I had like a box that is as big as the back of my vehicle once the seats are folded down that I also dealt with. And since we only leave the house one at a time, like, me fighting with the wind to try and cram these in a green bin was, I'm sure, a hilarious sight. And somewhere in the process, I think I pulled a few things, but, everything got recycled. So, hey.
You have conquered Mount Box.
I have conquered Mount Box.
Yeah, I was going to say, let me tell you about Mount Box. I live in an apartment, and one of the rooms is full of boxes.
Like, I still think Amazon needs to sell an efficient and affordable box shredder. Like, just a thing that you throw a box in and it shreds it into confetti so that you can dispose of it easier.
The problem is those devices are rather large and rather expensive.
And they also will like eat limbs and things, and probably don't want the liability. But I have absolutely researched what it would take to build my own. That was a rabbit hole that I'm not getting back. Apparently, you can build it out of PVC. Anyway, so yeah, like I am sore today, and I feel real dumb because all I really did is fight with a bunch of Amazon boxes. I mean, to be fair, it's not just Amazon. You know, there are other retailers to blame here. Like, I ended up ordering an Instant Pot because I thought that was a good idea. And it came in a box from Target that was 3 times the size of the Instant Pot. I feel like boxes are a thing. But hey, ordering things online is a thing we can do to stay safe and not be out in public.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I'm pretty sure the poor UPS guy was real pissed at me one day because I had made various orders over the course of 3 weeks from different retailers. I think it was 5 different retailers. And for whatever reason, serendipity happened and they all arrived on my doorstep on that one shipment. And he was unloading things for like 15 minutes to the point where like you couldn't get into our house. So I was having to go out through the garage to like kind of remove things from the porch to bring them into the house. And I guess this is what happens when I do something stupid like decide to order a kitty litter online. Anyway.
And heavy stuff too.
Well, no, I got like the lightweight kitty litter. It's like really light. So I thought, oh, hey, this will be fine. But no, it's huge. But anyway.
Kitty litter is still, I mean, you can make it as light as you want. It's still a bunch of rocks.
Yeah, I mean, it's still like it's still like 15 pounds instead of 30 pounds, but still. So how's everybody doing?
Oh, you know, it's been a day, a month, a week, even a year.
Time has become meaningless.
It's true. What is it anyway?
So yeah, I'm heading. I'm a month and a half now, and let me tell you, it's tough.
Yeah, I like this was my 5th week, so I'm a little further behind you, but still, like this was the week where shit started to get real weird. Like I was fine up through week 4, but week 5 is getting a little odd.
I'm glad I have some good games to play. Like Final Fantasy brought me to tears last night.
Yep, it'll do that.
Which of the Final Fantasies?
Final Fantasy VII.
Okay. Like there's multiple choice answers there right now.
Yeah.
I have mostly been playing World of Warcraft because I don't know why I'm playing World of Warcraft, but mostly it's because leveling is insanely fast, and I did level 60 through 79 in Borean Tundra.
I mean,
that's just silly.
Okay, but that's cool. I don't know what that makes me feel though. Like,
why levels? We can get rid of these.
Like I think that's the thing is like levels are meaningless.
Come to the dark side.
Yeah, we're here now, Tam.
I've been there with ESO for a while, like, and Guild Wars 2 is pretty much the same way, to where those are horizontally moving games rather than vertically moving games.
All right, so I'll be on the other side, because if the levels feel meaningful and they feel earned, they feel great. Like when I was playing WoW Classic, every time I dinged, that felt awesome.
But I think the problem is I'm not sure if that's sustainable. At least not along the course of multiple expansions. Like every time you have a new expansion, it just becomes less meaningful.
You know,
additional levels that you tack on.
You know who has done it though, who makes you go back and do all of the content, and boy do they get crap for this. And I mean, fair enough, like there's a lot of problems here, this is a complicated topic, but Final Fantasy VII, they make you play the whole darn game.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
what do you mean 14?
14. Yeah
Sorry, Final Fantasy 14 makes you play the whole darn game. Yes,
admittedly they are working on jiggering a Realm Reborn to make it, less oppressive.
Yeah, I mean, but that's got its own problem too, because the challenge there is, okay, I bought the new expansion and I want to play with my friends, but now I have to spend like 3 months slogging through the content as they're like, oh yeah, I remember where you're at. Yeah, that'll be really interesting.
Well, and in a way, that Final Fantasy XIV is a game where the levels don't matter, because it really doesn't matter what level you are. What matters is at what point of the main story you're at.
Like, I could think that honestly the levels are probably equally meaningless, and it's just where you are in the progression, like Thalen said. But the fact that you have to do all of it is its own issue. It is very hard for people to catch up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sadly, that's very true.
I mean,
This game is so very story focused that I understand why they still do it.
I mean, I've seen it so many times. Like, how many times has it been since we get somebody interested in this game, and then we sit and watch them do their thing for a couple months as they make their way through the content? And sure, you can pop in and help them every so often, but like, really, no, there's just a lot of story that you're going to have to chew through in order to get to the point where, everyone is on the same page again. And the same is true for like somebody that's been gone for several patches worth of content.
Yeah.
You kind of just have to wait for them to catch up. So yeah, like I was originally on the side of no, levels are useful. But I have crossed that boundary now. I am on the levels are meaningless, and we should have other ways of marking progression. So Tam, you've won.
Hooray.
Are you doing a happy dance? You don't sound like you're doing a happy dance.
I mean,
go wide instead of tall for progression.
I feel like it's a hollow victory because it came at the cost of MMOs as a genre.
Yeah, exactly. Like, because the level thing is, I mean, like, there was a time when I thought, oh yeah, this means something. But as I am taking these elevator rides up to 120, which is the current cap, I'm okay. Like, I'm enjoying myself. It's fun for me to run around and do some stuff. But it goes by so fast that, like, I'm not, I mean, okay, so yes, I completed Borean Tundra, but in most of these expansion Johns, I'm not completing one zone. Like Panda, I'm not even getting most of the way through Jade Forest before it's time to move to the next one. And like I would drive Thalen insane with the number of quests that I've abandoned. Because what's the point? Like, I'm past that area now. And
I feel like it's, I don't know, I feel like we've hit a point where, because it's like the MMO burnout problem, where to prevent yourself from burning out super, super hard, you have to quit when you are feeling a little tired of it, not when the thought of logging into the game makes you hate it.
Right.
And because of that, you kind of hit this point where if you don't have something else, like if there isn't some other mechanism, it's really hard to imagine what a game looks like. Like,
well,
what do you?
I think a prime example is the way that I engage with Elder Scrolls Online is vastly different than the way that I engage with any other MMO.
Yeah.
And I engage with that because I am going there to enjoy some story. Like, I'm showing up every so often to come in and enjoy some story, and they keep adding more story to the game, and they're not removing any story from the game, so I'm not having FOMO exploited of trying to force me to play the game. And as a result, like, I am way more willing to return at my own pace, run through a zone's worth of content, wander away for a while, come back 3 months later, pick up where I left off. Because like, it feels like, oh yeah, I'm just doing this because I like the story. I'm not trying to rush through the zone. I'm not trying to rush towards some objective because only the last zone is the one that's relevant. I'm just going to enjoy some story.
Yeah. And And I think that in FF14, I feel like that comes at the cost of like there's all of these trade-offs that are being made, and in Final Fantasy XIV, the trade-off is it's really, really, really hard to have everybody on at the same time, which means that there's a whole bunch of stuff that's like kind of inaccessible or like people aren't coordinated to do together unless you just don't ever stop playing.
But that in itself isn't sustainable either.
Or at least it isn't for me. There are definitely folks who have played it more or less nonstop for years, which is great, but I sort of quickly run out of things I want to do. And I don't like dailies, and I don't like the feeling of having to log in every day and play a game to stay caught up or relevant or whatever, because I just resent it. It's like I resent, oh, you didn't log in today? Well, you're permanently behind where you could be.
I am okay, this is sort of similar. I am scared to death what is going to happen when I log back into Animal Crossing, because it's been a little over a week since I last logged in.
You're going to have bedhead and nothing else is really going to happen.
Yeah.
Okay. So
they no longer want to punish you for not playing the game.
Yeah.
Okay, so like I had these apocalyptic visions that like all of my villagers would be leaving, and so it just accepts that, oh, hey, no, you've been offline for several days, but really in terms of the game and the characters here, only 1 day's passed.
I imagine there'll be a few days of weeds.
Okay.
But not much beyond that.
Yeah, I think you'll be fine.
Oh, speaking of which, since you haven't logged in, that means you didn't make it to my island to get a beard yesterday.
Oh, I do have a beard.
So if you, good.
I found one somewhere.
Okay.
In my travels.
And I think I mailed you a beard too, just in case, because I didn't know if you had one. So you have a beard in the mail too.
Yeah, I think I got your beard in the mail, and I was like, oh, I need to find somebody else who wanted a beard.
Try giving it to one of your villagers.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, which of your villagers needs a beard?
I wonder if Mitzi will wear a beard.
Almost certainly.
I gave my tough guy wolf a dress, and he's happy with it. Anyway, but yeah, like I have gotten to the point, Tam, where like I'm kind of there with the concept of dailies and the concept of any kind of, well, and it's the same discussion that we had a few, I don't know, weeks ago when we were talking about Destiny 2 and how the seasonal content's just been hollow because like it's all this chase content that's going to go away. And if I'm not playing at a regular clip, there's no way in hell I'll make it through it. And I guess that's why I keep using ESO as the example, is because, like it doesn't seem to care whether or not I've logged in or not. It's just there, and they release content at a pretty regular cadence.
Yeah, well, and every single piece of content in the game is relevant forever. Like that side quest in the starting zone that you didn't do, it'll get you XP towards your next champion rank.
Well, and I can't tell you how nice it is knowing that I essentially have the last set of armor that I'll ever need. Like, unless I decide at some point that I want to change the way my build works.
I was going to say, you could get a new fancier set.
Yeah, I mean, you can get new fancier sets, but like the crafted set that I made, that's whatever legendary quality. Yeah, that's as good as I'll ever necessarily need.
Yeah, it doesn't. As more content is added, it doesn't seem to feel the need to put you on a level or gear treadmill.
Mostly, yeah. Some of the, if you are into that game's highest end content, which is mostly Maelstrom Arena for solo content or the raids for group content, some of the new sets are sometimes enable people to go harder and faster.
But I gotta say, that's one of the frustrations that I've had with Final Fantasy XIV, is in playing in the intermittent nature that I play, I am always going to hit some point in the expansion where I don't have the gear to move past. And I am going to have to do some amount of grinding to get caught up to be able to do whatever the last dungeon is that, has been put in. Like, I don't have sufficient gear right now to do the last patches dungeon.
I was able to get to that just by doing the weapon quest, but yeah, I understand. They made the easiest relic weapon quest that I could possibly have imagined.
They really did. It's really nice.
Even the grind for repeated weapons is 1,000 poetics.
Yeah, it's just get 1,000 poetics, get a new weapon. But yeah, even to get your first weapon, it's 100% soloable, and it's basically they took the trust system and iterated on it a little, and so now there's an 8-man trust.
I will say though, trusts are amazing, and I just wish they would trickle it down through the rest of the content.
I mean, there's hopes that part of what they're going to do when they rework A Realm Reborn is enable trusts for the required dungeons in that. Whether they actually do that or not, we'll see. But yeah, it would be nice.
Like, I kind of wish I had done all the dungeons as a trust first instead of doing them with people, because there's just something charming about listening to the reactions that the other play or characters have as you're doing the content.
Oh yeah.
I really liked doing them as trusts the first time, just because it made the story feel like it flowed better.
I mean,
that, and as a tank, getting to see the dungeon before you have to do it for someone else is kind of nice.
Yeah, that's also really true.
Also, I love Thancred's reaction to seeing a golem with a bucket on its head.
Yeah,
I don't know if I ever did that dungeon with trust. I did all the others though. I didn't really like that dungeon.
Like, if I go in as a tank and I take the twins with me, Alphino's just like, is that a golem with a bucket on its head? And I'll say, so you're like, yep. But if I go in with Thancred, he's just like, no, are you kidding me? This is absurd.
Dadcred is incredulous.
Yes.
So other than ESO and Guild Wars 2, are there any other MMOs that do the no level thing really well? I mean, I think WoW and SWTOR have both kind of made levels meaningless, but they're still there.
Yeah. I don't know. And I don't actually think that even Guild Wars 2 or ESO really radically rethink the concept.
Because like in ESO, levels matter maybe the first content area that you do, but then they stop immediately after that.
Yeah. I don't think
Guild Wars 2 levels matter until you hit the cap, and then they stop mattering forever.
Yeah.
But you also kind of hit that cap real early.
I mean, the end of the original content.
Yep.
Just all their expansions are max level content now.
Yeah. I mean, I remember sort of stalling out in the leveling plot process in the original Guild Wars.
Yeah, me too.
Or Guild Wars 2, I mean. In the original, like the
original not so much, because you hit level 20 about a third of the way through the story.
Yeah. Yeah, the original didn't do that, but Guild Wars 2, I remember stalling out because it was like, oh, I'm level 63 out of 80, and I just don't want to grind.
And the thing is like, I could almost see 20 levels, because that would essentially serve as an extended tutorial, giving you, kind of drip feeding you your abilities as you get through. But like, by the time you hit 20, you should be a fully functional class.
I mean, that's basically what it was in the original Guild Wars.
Yeah, pretty much everything that was
pre-searing characters aside.
Right.
Like the first big decision I remember was when you chose like your secondary class. I think that was around 10.
Well, that's not permanent. It's only your primary class is permanent.
Right. So I guess actually moving through our list of topics, I don't know if you've been following what's been going on at Kotaku and or basically all of the formerly Gawker media sites. But
the Geo Media drama?
Yeah, the Geo Media drama. They have been hemorrhaging editors, writers for a while. And then Friday, Jason Schreier left Kotaku, and the editor for Gizmodo also left at the same time. And I think I'm guessing they coordinated it because they basically posted it at the same time. So like, the only thing that I know of that Schreier is doing from this point on is he's basically taken the group that he did the Kotaku podcast with and like moving it elsewhere. So it's like him and Maddie Myers, and I don't remember who the third person is. But yeah, like I think it's the implosion of a site. Because like the only real reason I paid attention at all was because of Jason Schreier.
I have been expecting something like this basically ever since Deadspin died in October. Yeah. So I'm not surprised.
maybe when a site gets bought by a VC fund, it's not a good idea.
Maybe VC funds aren't a good idea.
Maybe. Yeah, I mean, like, I guess on some level it's a little sad. Not that Kotaku is, a bastion of responsibility, but I did appreciate the random behind-the-scenes deep dives that Jason Schreier gave.
He said he's going to be staying in games journalism, so I expect that will continue wherever he ends up.
I have a feeling that he will end up at some other site that's probably more reputable. I don't know.
Like what?
Somebody threw out New York Times as a possible thing, because there's a lot of quote unquote mainstream media sites are now trying real hard to get into games.
Weirdly, none of them seem to be doing any better.
No, not really.
If you ask people who have no experience talking about a thing to talk about a thing, you don't get good results.
Yep.
I know that he has done an article for the New York Times at this point.
Yeah. It will be interesting to see where that goes, because there's a lot of people that left at the same time or within months of the same time. It would be interesting if a lot of them coalesce at a same location. The problem is it costs money to run a site. And I know when Deadspin died, they basically spun up a temporary and snarkily named site that only lasted through early February because, things take money. I don't know. I don't know what that landscape looks like. I
hope they land on their feet.
I know, quote unquote, games journalism is a real questionable place.
It's weird.
It's transfer. Schreier is attempting to go from enthusiast press to actual press, and he's the only person I've seen who's come close to making that divide.
Yeah. Well, I also think about pick another form of media. What does the journalism for that look like?
For, say, movies.
Yeah.
Honestly, the journalism landscape is looking pretty bleak across the board these days.
Sure, yeah.
There is also that.
Because I've often thought about what do I actually want out of games journalism, and the stuff that I want, nobody else wants. I think it would be cool if you had, if you had a site that talked about, there was basically an entire site that did stuff like those periodic Twitter threads that show up that are hey, what's the most ridiculous trade-off you've made in a game? Or what was your biggest mistake? Or a bunch of how the sausage is made stuff. But the broader gaming audience does not want that at all. Provably.
And my favorite thing has been in recent memory has been the no clip documentaries where they get in behind the scenes of how the original Doom was made, or how Witcher 3 came together, or the ups and downs of Final Fantasy 14. That's really what I want to read, and some of that with news mixed in, but what ends up happening is most of these sites rapidly regurgitate press releases.
Yeah.
And over the years, I have gotten on a lot of press lists. So I tend to get a lot of these same press releases in my inbox when everyone else is. It's usually, they've got a 2 or 3 day embargo on them. And then, like clockwork, 2 or 3 days later, I see this same thing on all these sites. And it's almost verbatim for what was in the press release. It's basically just paraphrasing a press release. And that doesn't necessarily interest me. And especially because I'm getting the press releases too. What I want is personal stuff. How did people feel about the creation of the game process? What were the challenges that they encountered? But that's also the kind of stuff that studios don't usually like to say. Unless they're at a friendly audience like a GDC. I love the long form GDC talks that basically like dissect a game. And admittedly, like a lot of those are like games that have had some time pass before they actually do a deep dive. But like I love listening to those. And like to some extent, like what Jason Schreier was doing, I enjoyed, but I would have liked to also seen the articles when things were not going horrible. Like, I want to know what happened behind, like, you know, do a deep dive into the creation process of Horizon Zero Dawn. You know, like, what were some of the decisions and challenges that they faced? Like, not just give me an article that's really well researched and well thought out when there's a dumpster fire. Like, I want to know the positives too. Like,
man, I wish I had good news for you.
I was going to say, I don't know how any news does that. Like what you're describing is a puff piece, right?
Not exactly.
Oh, I was actually going to go a completely different way, and you would have to have a game that wasn't a dumpster fire at some point during development.
Yeah, but like I think it's just a given that they all are at some point.
I mean, it also feels like what you want are a lot of like they're a little bit drier and they're for a very different audience, but like there's a lot of Gama Sutra articles that you might be interested in.
Yeah, and I read them. I do. Like I mean, I've got that in my RSS feed, and I read them all the freaking time. I read GDC stuff. I watch the GDC lectures. I really enjoy that kind of stuff, but that's not apparently what the gaming audience wants.
No.
And I think the problem is, I don't know. I mean, I know I've bemoaned the fact of how I miss Electronic Gaming Monthly. And it's not so much that I miss that specific magazine. It's that I miss that era of not needing to fill a 24-hour news cycle and actually having a monthly news cycle be like something you could actually do. And as a result, like, I don't know, like, so the YouTube cycle of news is desperation on the part of the content creators trying to fill minutes or try and capture eyeballs, you know, so you got to do it at clickbaity and you got to pretend like you've got some revelation, even though it's like wild speculation, or you know, you misinterpreted the third paragraph in a press release, and now you're going to go off on this wild tangent, you know, because you think you have an idea of how it's going to work out. And it's infuriating.
Yeah, I feel like, and I think it would be interesting to see more like insider news, but I also like contend with, I feel like I think I've commented on this before, but like the job of a game designer is to know what people want before they want it. And boy, is that a recipe for a lot of people constantly telling you that you're out of your mind and what you want to make sounds bad. Because until somebody sits down and tries it and realizes like, oh, this is actually great, and I never would have thought of this, that person must be a genius. Like, well, no, we just thought of it before anybody realized, like before the average person realized that was a thing that was good. But it also means that you go through so many iterations where like, is this actually a good idea? Maybe. It's a crazy idea, but it's the crazy ideas that are good and that people remember. And I have seen, I mean, Peter Molyneux is the perfect example of this, because like Peter Molyneux openly talks about all the crazy ideas he thought he was going to put into a game, and his games never have them because you try them and they don't work. But it's like, oh, this is a thing we're trying. This is a thing we're thinking about. But he's sort of broadly a laughingstock among the gaming audience as he overpromised and underdelivered type, versus being a visionary type that's thinking about what are things that people might like that they might not realize they like, and then talking about that creative process. And I think that a lot of devs in a variety of industries have learned to just keep the creative process as private as possible because you get that reaction. But man, I wish I could just read that. Like,
well, like one of my favorite series that I've gotten into is a YouTuber that goes by Modern Vintage Gamer, And he is he was basically an Xbox era console hacker. He released some of the custom BIOSes and things like that, but he's done this whole series of basically exploring the DRM of all these old consoles and how they worked and how they were ultimately defeated. And like, they're super technical pieces, but they're really interesting to see, like, yeah, this stuff's 20 years old at this point, but it's interesting to see how these schemes worked and, you know, why they were successful for as long as they were, and ultimately, like, what it led to for somebody to figure out how to defeat lockout chips and things like that. And that's a different kind of thing than the traditional, you know, game story, but, like, there's all these interesting stories to be had from the production of games, and very few people are telling them. Well, like, I know I posted this, you know, on our channel, but like, there was a piece breaking down the creation of Crash Bandicoot and all the crazy things that they had to do in order to get the level of performance that they were needing in that game on the early hardware. And I guess maybe I just have a different interest in this sort of thing than like the average person, but I find it all fascinating.
Yeah. And I wonder if the real answer is, like, I don't know. I started to say that. I was like, oh, a subscription service for very specific things so that you can sustain it. But, like, I don't even know if I would pay for that.
Right. That was a magazine.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, currently that's Patreon.
Yeah.
But with a Patreon, you have to end up with so many patrons before it really becomes a sustainable thing.
Yeah, that's true for any subscription service.
Like how much are you willing to pay for that? You know, sure, I might chip in a couple bucks a month for something, but that also comes with the expectation that, like, you're going to be delivering content on a pretty regular basis. So, yeah, I mean, like, okay, in order to make a livable wage off Patreon, you end up having to have, you know, multiple thousands of patrons. And a lot of these little side projects that I was talking about, like, are largely just labor of love for people. Like, it was a thing that they were really interested in, and now they're gonna share with the quote-unquote community how these things work. And I think that more or less explains, like, the GDC talks, because that's very much people sharing because they care.
Well, and AGDQ is very similar in that it's, like, a lot of the AGDQ events are people talking in extreme depth about the way the game is put together.
Sometimes even with one of the developers, which is weird to me.
Yeah.
The couple of times that I've seen a developer, like, either commenting on someone's speed run or, like, hanging out while they're doing the speed run, like, they seem to be fully on board with this concept. And
Jerry Kavanaugh's done it a few times.
And shocked that they're able to do what they can do. I don't know. Like, the problem with enthusiast media is there's a very thin line between, like, I don't know, like, there's a multi-phase spectrum there that, like, is, and people have a bad habit of falling into one of many traps. Like, so you can either end up being toxic and abusive, or you can end up simply regurgitating press articles or press releases, or you can end up basically becoming the mouthpiece for whatever game company you're featuring content from. And, like, I don't think any of those three is necessarily helpful. And I think it happens because time to think about something and formulate your opinions and, like, really let it mull over takes more time than you really can, like, regurgitate on a 24-hour cycle. Like, if you're having to release 5 new articles a day in order to keep up with things.
I was just thinking, like, if over the 10 years that I worked in games, if I needed to come up with one interesting thing that had happened in the studio a day, that would have been borderline impossible.
Yeah. But now if you have a quote-unquote news site, it's not just one thing. You got to have 5-6 articles a day or people will stop coming to your site. So they're in desperation mode trying to find anything vaguely interesting that they can spin into an article or a video or, podcast fodder. I mean, shit, it's hard enough for us to come up with a couple topics every week to talk about. And we've got 7 people. I just think back when it was a monthly cycle, it was sustainable. You could spend a week or two working on something. Whereas now that, everyone wants fresh infusion of content 24/7, I don't think anything's sustainable.
I wonder if there's going to be a backlash on that.
I think there's going to have to be because, the same thing, I've seen it with Twitch streamers, I've seen it with YouTubers. Eventually, they just break down and can't do it anymore.
Yeah. And for a while, there's always somebody else willing to follow up, to take their place. But that's not infinite.
Well, okay, so the people that do function and do work are folks like Linus Tech Tips, which has turned that into a cottage industry. I think he's got 25 people on the payroll now. He's basically become
a media outlet.
A media outlet. Yeah, it's no longer one person doing a channel. Not that I think that ever was the case there, but still, it's when you have a lot of people on a payroll, you're a real outlet at that point. And those are the ones that seem to have staying power, are the ones that are doing this as a business. The individuals that, scramble to make a post every single day or make a news release every day and a video of it, I don't know how long that lasts. I made it 3 years doing a post every single day before I decided I just couldn't do it every day. And I still do it mostly every single weekday, but there's a lot of nothing posts that I end up making. And you're either there, you're not there for news. You're there because you're vaguely interested in what the hell I'm doing. I don't know. I have a feeling there will be a reckoning, and I don't know what the end state after it is going to look like. But nothing is sustainable currently, which is significantly longer than I thought that topic was going to be. Okay, Tam, I think this one's been on there for a while. The Star Wars Galaxy crafting hole.
Oh, man. So I've gotten fairly deep into Galaxies and sort of uncovered a bunch of stuff that I'd never really gone deep into. But that game has one of the most incredible crafting systems ever devised. And its approach is so simple because what it says, what Galaxies says is, oh, you'd like that item? It's not that hard to get that item. You need materials. You can get materials. You can put them together. You need a bunch of different ones, and you do need to keep track of materials. But if you want to make a basic low-level blaster, you need some metal. And every resource you get, the resourcing is incredibly clever because you might mine up some iron, but instead of just iron, rather than it being I work on copper until I get to bronze, I work on bronze until I get to iron, I work on iron until I get to steel, etc. Every single resource you get is potentially an end game resource. It's just that recipes don't necessarily care how specific it is. So you can get you could mine up some flexible superconductive blue aluminum. And okay, I'm going to make a new, blaster pistol for myself. I need aluminum. But if I want, and that'll get you a level 10, level 20 blaster. You want a max level blaster, you need hyperconductive flexible aluminum. And whether it's blue or red doesn't really matter. But maybe if you're making something specific, or if you need a specific upgrade part, that might care if it's red aluminum. And so all of the resources that you have all of these different traits that the more fancy the item you're making is, the more specific the resources you need are. And it means that it means that it's really, really easy to know what you need to make any given thing. You don't have to worry about like quantities or, it's the same number of resources to make a lightsaber, no matter what level or class or quality that lightsaber is. It's just which resources do you need and how specific do they need to be. And since every resource you're getting is always specific in a certain way, you could at a low level very reasonably strike a rare resource mine, and like that's great. Either you have super high quality stuff, or you can sell that to people for huge amounts of money. And then on top of that, resources have quality levels, and there's different ways to get like higher quality resources that are based on the physical location that you mine them from. So like there's two ways to get resources. You can plop down a harvesting building where you feed it upkeep and it churns out over time. Even while you're logged off, it'll churn out resources. And as you fill up resources, you can, eventually it'll run out of whatever that node is, and the new node will spawn somewhere else. But buildings can only be built in certain places. And you can also, and you'll figure out where you want to build your building by using a mining, I don't know what it's called, a sensor, basically.
Yeah, you
equivalent
go
of a dowsing rod.
Yeah, you go around pinging, looking for whatever thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And your pings are huge. Like you can ping a really big area. And what's really neat about it is, okay, so if you just need a whole bunch of material, you can plop down a building as close as you can to the epicenter of the place you just pinged. The closer you are to the center, the higher quality the materials are. And if you manage to get in the direct center, you get perfect quality materials. And there's a little bit of trial and error finding exactly where you want to go. But that's why it's called hand sampling, where you pull a sample of material yourself. And if you just do that, like basically you dig with a laser shovel or whatever the appropriate thing is, find it, and you can see the quality immediately, as opposed to waiting for your harvester to harvest some of it. But this means that you have all sorts of interesting levers in the crafting interface, where if I just want to, like my crafter builds starships, I can build a starship, and it's not that hard. It took maybe a week and not a lot of money for me to put together a B-wing for myself. And it was mostly like it wasn't a week of active stuff. It was a week of this harvester just needed time to harvest up a whole bunch of steel. And it's like, okay, cool. I built a B-wing. I can fly around, and that B-wing is great. And if I want to, but what I can also do is, if I really want just like an absolutely incredible B-wing, I can go down this rabbit hole where I'm getting these like incremental improvements to the stats on my ship. And like, this is the base stats. And like get the, continually refine all of these different things. But because the ship is made up of parts, I can basically say, okay, I've got the ship I want. It'll do good enough. It'll do well enough for now. But if I want to go back and improve it, I can do that. Oh, hey, I've got a better blaster on this thing. I've got a better cannon. I've got better shields. I've made a better version of this thing. And so you have this sort of, and so there's this constant like flow of materials. And because spawns are always different, there's this interesting game of as a crafter going out into the world and finding rare materials. And it could be anywhere in the entire world.
Yep. Back when the game was, actually like officially running, like that was the hole that I had fallen down. I was a, full level chef, and most of my gameplay was running around, mostly on Tatooine, but occasionally Naboo, looking for places to plop down harvesters to get, good quality water and wheat and stuff, and then bringing that all back to my house near Anchorage and putting together schematics for various drinks and food, and then loading up my factories and just churning out masses and masses of stuff to sell.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting, honestly.
Yeah, it's a actually really interesting game. And the other piece of it is that you have to be a crafter to set up a vendor. So if you want to sell items, you need to have or be a crafter. And so your crafter is also driving like the entire game's economy. It also means that you don't have to like spend forever trying to sell your stuff, because stuff that you want to sell is just listed. You set up a vendor, put the stuff you want to sell on, and it's like, oh, I make cool chef items or furniture or starship parts or whatever it is. Set up your vendor and go.
I think it's really interesting to see the progression of ideas between EverQuest and Star Wars Galaxies and EverQuest II. Because, like, looking at the original crafting system for EverQuest II, they were trying to accomplish a lot of the same things you're talking about, but just with slightly different levers.
Mm-hmm.
So, gone was the harvesting aspect, or at least it was a little bit different. So, like, every node had the ability to either drop the common items that were off of it or the rare items. And the rare items can be used for higher quality versions of patterns, similar to like high quality materials in Final Fantasy XIV. But so this system is gone. It no longer exists in EverQuest, but originally every single craftable item was made up of a bunch of subcomponents. So in order to make a backpack, you'd have to leather sheets, and you'd have to craft those. You'd have to have seams or straps. And then eventually it all combines it together into the final finished item. And depending on how high a quality each of the subcomponents were, it ended up dictating how good a finished item it was.
Yeah, and I think I don't actually love that, because it means that you end up trying to track all of these bizarre sub pieces, and there's never a good interface for it.
And it ended up really being frustrating, and I don't think the players loved it. Because, like, for example, say you wanted some 16-slot backpacks. Well, you better perfect it all the way through, or you're going to end up with, like, a 12-slot backpack or a 13-slot backpack.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's a similar... It's like an attempt at a similar system. They just went about it in different directions, and I don't think it was anywhere near as successful. And eventually they just replaced it to where there's no sub-assemblies. You're just making items.
And that's why I like it's like, oh, I built this ship, or I built this piece of armor, but it's also got all these other things that I plug into it that I build separately and can be replaced.
Right, and that's the key problem is so say once you made this backpack, it's not like you could rework the backpack. I mean, you could deconstruct it and get materials back from it with a loss, but you couldn't say, okay, now that I've gotten higher skill, I'm going to rework this item to perfect it.
Yeah. And the other thing that Galaxies does, which I think is fascinating, or the other two things that they do that I think are fascinating. One is there's no such thing as nodes, so you're not competing with other crafters for materials.
I don't think really the node concept went in until World of Warcraft, did it?
I don't think so.
Well, okay, so take that back. There were harvest nodes in Horizon. That may be the first game that I played that had them.
Yeah, because neither UO nor Star Wars Galaxies did. Both of those, it was just you wandered around poking in places until you found a place that gave you what you wanted.
Yeah. And it's super neat to see, because I'll sometimes, zip by on the speeder and be like, oh, there's like 12 people all kind of standing in the same place, harvesting whatever cool material is there. And they've all got their like guard droids out, or like they're in a party and they're using their droids. Like, oh, they have droids set up with a party buff to make their quality better, but then other people have their battle droids out to protect the group from whatever wandering stuff might harass them. Because only crafters can have max level combat droids.
Right. I think he said that's how crafters can actually get around the battle content in the world.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, you've got a blaster pistol, but that's largely decorative. It's your battle droid that's doing most of the work, and it's mostly just put a decent AI in there and just let it go. It'll keep you safe. And the other piece of it is you can reverse engineer if you got an of the whale piece and an of the, fox that was agility and wisdom?
I don't remember. Yeah.
Falcon, might have been
owl. Whatever it was, it's like, oh, I got 2 drops and they're both bad. Like, they're both not stat combinations that I need because they're randomized. It's like, oh, I got this random loot drop with random stats. And like, that's mostly fast or super frustrating, especially when they have multiple different stats. So what they have is reverse engineering. You can items will have a reverse engineering level, which is how many items you need to consume. And then when you do that, you can pick whichever stats you want from all the items you put together to fuse into one item. And so you'll see somebody who has painstakingly found like all of these items with the absolute best stats and managed to get all of them together on one item. And it's like, wow, that's a ridiculously great, shield generator for a starship. It's just better. And depending on how like refined you want that to be, the more like iterations you've got to go through and the more items you need to consume to get there. But it means that you've got this sort of constant item drain out of the game. And it's like, oh, hey, I got a random drop. And it's like, sure, the combination of stats is garbage, but it has one really good one. And even if you get a piece that's just garbage stats, it's still useful because you can kind of slot it in and then you just don't take any. You slot it in to consume it, but you don't need to take any of its stats.
So a system that I have not engaged with in Phantasy Star Online 2 is somewhat similar to that. You get good affixes on weapons mostly by consuming them from other weapons. So like this thing might have a whole bunch of complete garbage on it, but if it has one thing that's good, you can put that thing on your better weapon.
Yeah, it's a super cool idea because then it makes like every drop potentially exciting. And it makes me
not at all relevant to the content I'm doing, but
that's fair.
Even so.
It reminded me of a thing that Bells mentioned where it's very, you find it super exciting when anything you get, any drop could be like gold, super exciting at any time. And this does that. I feel like a system like that, and I need to play more PSO2 and get there because I really like it in Galaxies where it's like, oh, hey, yeah, I'm being showered in loot Diablo style. Maybe not quite Diablo style, but I'm getting a lot of loot and it's not just vendor junk. Like it all can be applied and is useful in interesting ways.
I think the first game that I played that had that functionality was Dark Age of Camelot, specifically starting with the Shrouded Isles expansion, because there were a lot of random world drops in that expansion, and they were random statted, but because they were such random stats, it was highly unlikely you'd ever get an item with perfect stats. Like, So say you're a friar, well, and it's got 3 stats on it. Well, maybe like 2 of them might be relevant. But there was enough of a stat hit that it was always worth using. Even though you had 1 stat on there that was useless, it was still pretty good gear. So, and then like every so often there'd be the really random, rare chance that you got an item that was like 100% relevant, which was amazing.
That's always fun.
But like the not relevant stats weren't really a detriment. Like, so yeah, no, your primary stat is the one you cared about the most. So if you saw an item with like good numbers on that, then you were fine. You'd be perfectly fine. I mean, I really like systems where, as a crafter, me deconstructing an item of a specific stat family allows me to then craft that stat family. And I mean, ESO does something sort of like that with its research system, but like, I feel like that's not really far enough for me. I think something closer would have been the way that you learned additional stat packages in like Star Wars The Old Republic.
Yeah.
But the difference there is like that was just brute forcing it, which was frustrating. I'd like to see it to where, oh, I found this item out in the world, and if I deconstruct it, I can now create something similar.
Yeah, and one of the ways that one of the things from a design standpoint that's always very difficult to do is it's like, oh, you got the best thing. Now you can just crank out an infinite number of the best thing. You can just build the best thing forever. And one of the things I think is really interesting about the way Galaxies does it is, yeah, you can build the best thing, one of them.
One-time use recipes?
Well, it's not that it's a one-time use recipe. It's that the reverse engineering process yields an item with stats. And so you spend a bunch of items and resources to make an item, and you get to super customize the stats and make it great. But it means that you end up with a continual flow of items, and you don't just have like, oh, well, this person figured out how to make this one great item, and now they dominate the market forever, or at least until somebody else manages to pull it off. As much fun as it was being the only person on Argent Dawn with certain enchanting patterns and selling them for silly amounts of gold, it's very interesting to see like how much more effective it lets crafting be when it isn't learn the thing and crank it out. But yeah, I did not think I would like one-time use recipes, but I kind of do, because it makes the resulting item feel really meaningful. I was like, oh, I'm going to go get consumables I'm going to craft my lightsaber. I'm going to go get consumables to make sure that like I have the best chance of it being as good as it possibly can be. And like getting all the way up to 100% quality feels awesome. And I try not to think super hard about the items the like consumable stuff that you want to eat and drink are Bespin port and some kind of cake. And all I can think of is like, this is why the Republic fell. Jedi sitting in their fancy buildings, eating cake and drinking port, making their lightsabers.
The only thing is you need to hit the Walmer Peak.
Yeah, exactly. That's how you do it. That's how you build the best lightsaber. But yeah, I love seeing crafting as a whole fully featured game in and of itself, independent of everything of the rest of the game, and how cool that can be. I miss the heyday of MMOs, yo.
Yep.
And as much as I'd love to think that they're coming back, I don't know if they ever will, at least not in the same way.
I have no idea. Final Fantasy VII Remake is a game that exists, so I give up on all of my previous beliefs about where the games industry might go.
I have a fear that we're not going to see anything creative in the MMO space, like really creative, until the MMO space as a whole just completely dies and is eventually resurrected after some time has passed from the ashes.
Probably.
I mean, that's been true for a lot of other genres.
I mean, I say this as I'm playing the most vanilla and corporate MMO experience of WoW as we podcast. So long as a WoW exists, I just don't know how much space there is for something else other than other games have found their niches, but they're all pretty comfortable in the patterns that they're functioning in. And while 14 is doing interesting things story-wise, I don't think that they're doing a lot that's really unique or different mechanic-wise. I think we may have enough time for this final topic, since we got a little bit of a late start. Tam, I think this was yours, right?
Yes. So I loaded up Beat Saber. That game is great.
Is this your first?
That game has been the case for VR, quite frankly.
Yes, I think Beat Saber is the most compelling argument for VR I've ever played.
I hear I should try out Half-Life Alyx, but yeah,
I don't have the hardware to try Half-Life Alyx, and I don't know that I feel like dropping $1,000 or whatever it is to have that experience. Part of what I feel like makes Beat Saber really, really great as a VR game is that its play sessions are about the same length as Guitar Hero. So it gives you a natural, this thing on my head is uncomfortable, time to stop point. Versus when I was trying Skyrim, which was fun and an interesting experience, but it was like, I'm uncomfortable, physically uncomfortable continuing to play this, but I want to keep playing it because I haven't found a good stopping point. But yeah, I mean, yes, I'm late to the party, Beat Saber, but it's super fun. I
mean, to be completely fair, it hasn't been on PlayStation 4 its entire life.
Yeah, but this is a thing. It was also a surprisingly decent workout. I cranked the difficulty up, and that game gets hard. I was like, oh, this game is pretty easy. Cool, but I'm a little, it's a little easy to perfect these songs. I'm like, oh, crank the difficulty up. Oh, okay. Hard is hard, and expert is no. And then there's an expert plus. So there's definitely progression room.
This is also how I feel about Spin Rhythm.
And the other fun part is that according to my exercise tracker, it was actually a not terrible workout.
It looks really fun.
It is pretty fun.
Along the lines of games that are exercise, I've actually heard that Ring Fit Adventure is actually pretty fun.
Me too. Shame you can't buy it anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah, no kidding.
You can't get a Ring Fit ever. I mean, if I ever get access to that, I will probably buy one and move my Switch downstairs where it's reasonable to play. But I mean, I have a feeling I would have to do VR in the living room as well because my office is too small for VR. On Half-Life Alyx, I've heard that your experience is very much dependent upon the hardware that you're playing it on. That some of the setups are better than others.
Yeah, I guess I could believe that.
That's been the thing stopping me from doing more VR is it's just there's a lot of setup for something I'm not sure I'm that into.
Yeah, I mean, the initial outlay is always the problem. And it's okay, so I know if I spend $600 on a video card, I will get my use out of that video card. If I spend $600 on a headset that I'm not sure if I'm going to enjoy yet, that's kind of a big ask. I still think in order to get broader adoption, the price point has to come down considerably more.
Also, people have to be more willing to wear headsets on their head, and I'm not sure they are. I'm not.
Yeah,
quite frankly.
It's uncomfortable. It's oh, this is a really cool novelty, and after 15 minutes, I'm okay, I'm probably a bit done.
Oh, this is what it would feel like if I were wearing a Viewmaster. I kept expecting this late in the life cycle of the PlayStation 4 for PlayStation VR to have a significant price drop. And at that point, I'd probably pick one up just to play around with it.
Yeah, but they're still making them regularly. I don't know if this is a thing that's still being produced at a reasonable pace.
What is?
PSVR.
I mean, before the world went nuts, I know just in stores they were kind of rare to find one. Well, we have any other things that we need to talk about before we wrap things up? Because I think we've probably reached time.
I think we're good.
Think we're good?
Okay. Well, hopefully you enjoyed the show, and we will see you again next week. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Yeah.